Wonderful. Okay, everybody, before we ask everybody to mute, I'd like everybody to join me in saying hello and thank you and welcome to Eric Rosentreter from Woodinville.
Hey, Eric, welcome.
Oh
boy.
Hey.
Woohoo.
Great.
Party time.
So, Eric Leader, if you can please mute everybody except for you, me, and Eric. Okay, we good?
Quiet. That's the point, isn't it?
Yep. Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us again tonight. We have a very special guest with us, Eric Rosentreter from Woodinville, but not just Woodinville, like Delilah's and a few other places, right, Eric?
Yes, I started my career in whiskey by working for 13 years at Delilah's. I worked for just over a year at the Beverage Testing Institute doing production coordination. I was a regional manager for the Deutsch Family Wine and Spirits portfolio, that being Redemption. Obviously, Dave Schmier, I've always been a fan of his work, as well as Bibb and Tucker and Masterson's. Left that job about 2 months before the pandemic hit, so nickel's worth of free advice. Don't change career trajectories before the whole planet gets yeah, so I did about just under a year at Warehouse Liquors with Gene. Mike called me one day. Mike from Delilah's called me and told me Gene was looking for people, so I jumped at the opportunity to work with him. And I started with Woodinville. I cover Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, so I'm only doing 3 states, which is nice. I started with them mid-July-ish. So relatively new to the position, but you know, our industry is in constant flux still. So it's just kind of jumping.
You know, what I love there is that you've touched many different people and organizations that are near and dear to everybody here. You know, Warehouse, obviously, Delilah's. I mean, all of Dave Schmier is just a giant in the industry and all the things he's produced. It's really incredible. So you must have some interesting stories, but we can get to those later. You know, and now you end up at an award-winning distillery. Okay, you know, Woodinville is award-winning. I learned about Woodinville several years ago from, as with many, I learned about Woodinville from Brett Pantani, okay, from Binny's. I don't know if you know this, but a few of us run the craft whiskey table for a fundraiser every year for a homeless shelter. And Brett helps curate that table with us. And years ago, he told, right, and it's great. So through that table, I've just learned so much about craft distilleries, and Woodinville is one of the ones that I've learned about. I want to tell everybody that we do have 5 samples tonight. So a few things, we might go a little bit late, maybe 8:15, like we did with, you know, Compass Box, because we don't want to rush through. And also remember, you are under no obligation to finish all 5 ounces tonight, okay? No obligation to do so. You want to make sure that you can taste this stuff at the end. We have put the list in the chat, at the very top of the chat. So Dave, Eric, so that we don't waste time here, Eric, can you please tell us what we're about to drink? Tell us about this, the bourbon, everybody. We can start with the bourbon, 90 proof. Please tell us about it.
So the bourbon thing, it's a high rye mash bill. So it is 72 corn, 22 rye, 6% malted barley.
Can you slow down? Hold on. We have some geeks on here. Say that a little bit more slowly for them, please.
It's 72 corn, 22% rye, 6% malted barley at 9 proof. All of our whiskeys are 5 years old. They're non-age dated straight, but we found that the sweet spot has been around 5 years old. If we do a finish on it, which we experiment with sometimes, as well as the port finish that we have tonight, that's 5 years plus the finish time. We're not obsessed about age. It seems like we are a mature group here, so we know how to look past age statements and just appreciate the whiskey.
You know, one thing that I read on the website is that you're getting all of your grain from one farm. Is that correct? It's called the Omlin Family Farm in Quincy, Washington. Can you tell us a little bit about why do you get everything from them, and what's that relationship like?
I mean, that's just how our partnership evolved. When Brett and Orland started distilling whiskey, they actually just bought in bulk from that farm, and they started using a lot of it as their production started to continue to go. And from what I'm told, the farmers, a couple members of the Omlin family came down to see what was going on, and they found out that they were distilling whiskey with their grains, and the partnership kind of just grew in and of itself. I mean, I know, grain to glass, or farm to bottle is the hashtag du jour as far as marketing goes, but it's a true relationship. My second week with this job, they actually flew me out. I made whiskey. I unloaded grain trucks. I was on the family farm. So our distilleries right by Chateau Saint Michel, so in between Seattle and the Cascade Mountains, and the family farm is actually on the east side of the Cascade Mountains. So one thing that I definitely pull from all of our whiskeys, because we open ferment for 72 hours when we're making the distiller's beer, is that I do get like a little bit of wine from the yeast that is absorbed through the background. As we first expanded, we thought about moving our distillery to, increase our production output. And our distilling community friends were like, if you do that, you're going to miss out on this background yeast that happens inside your whiskey. You got to stay, otherwise it's going to change.
Wow. So are you getting all of your grains? So the corn, the rye, and the malted barley too from them?
The barley as much as we can. The barley is grown in state no matter what. As we grow in size, it's hard to rotate the barley in there consistently in the crop rotation. So the barley doesn't take a super high priority with us all the time, because it's such a small percent. It's only 6% of the bourbon, and plays no part in the rye. So,
and the malting. What about the malting of the barley?
We malt in-house. We process all the grains. Yeah.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we might have a little labeling issue. Just want to make sure. We might have misprinted something on the label. The straight bourbon, what is the proof of the straight bourbon?
90 proof.
Okay, so we might have misprinted the labels there. Okay, because we wrote down on our label 48.9 or something. So everybody should know that the straight bourbon is 90 proof. Okay, so we had a misprint on the labels there. So that's important. And by the way, and the rye also, what is the proof on the rye?
The first three that we're having are all 90 proof.
Okay, so we had a misprinting on the labeling, everybody. So pay attention to that. Make sure you get that there. All right, wonderful. So other stuff that goes into making this, obviously, are the barrels. Okay, yes. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the barrels and how you select them, char, stuff like that.
Sure. If we're not all drinking whiskey yet, then let's go ahead and cheers. As I say, my microphone needs batteries, so.
Damn, that's delicious.
We actually we use Independent Stave as our cooperage, so they're all standard 53 gallon. I do believe they played with various sizes, but that was way early on when we started in 2010. So 53 standard gallons, level 4 char, heavy toast on the heads, and we actually condition the wood for 18 months before we cooper it. And by condition it, I mean we leave it outside.
Is that because of the climate there and
yes.
How wet it is and what that does to the barrels?
Exactly right. It's very much similar to our friends across the pond in Scotland. A lot of them, very specifically Glenmorangie and Ardbeg, treat their wood outside for 1.5 to 2 years, depending, sometimes longer. We have found that it kind of softens the tannic acid, really brings out the wood sugars a little bit once we fire it up and toast it. That wood is partially decayed, and some of those fibrous materials, the tannic acids have started to break down. So really softens the wood up, not physically, but just more on the palate and the approach.
Got it. And where's the wood actually sourced? Are you trying to use oak from your part of the country?
No, it's mostly from Missouri.
Okay, all right. So
Yeah.
okay, so the grain is local. The
Yes.
oak comes from elsewhere. Okay, got it. Wonderful. So you mentioned a very specific mix there of 72% corn. Okay, and then 22% rye and then 6% malted barley. How did your distillers come up with that mix? That's an interesting mix.
That's where Dave Pickerel comes into the conversation. May he rest. That our distilling team was really obsessed with getting Dave to help us in the distilling process. I mean, back then, I believe it was post Maker's Mark, pre Whistle Pig. That's kind of when he earned the nickname Johnny Whiskey Seed, because he consulted with a handful of distilleries and really kind of left his fingerprints on a lot of distilleries. He was a very important person in the craft distilling community in the United States. So we finally got a hold of him. I think Orlin went to Chicago to Whiskey Fest, finally got him into a conversation, and he ended up spending about a year at our distillery working with our team. And when it came time to decide on a mash bill, in true nerd style, they blind tasted various mash bills. Then they went with various wood expressions with independent stave. So it was very much, and this really appealed to me as a brand story, especially with my time at BTI. They removed all the marketing, all the bottles, all the labels, and just said, just shut up and try the juice and pick which one you like, which is something I really appreciate. I want
to make sure people know that Dave Pickerel, he was very involved in Maker's Mark and others. He really was a giant in the industry. So, we've spoken with others, other distilleries where they talked about a mentor who came in, an old pro who came in and helped them with what they made. And it's always a great story to hear it. But I don't want us to dwell on this. I want us to come back to this in a minute. I do want us to move to the next expression. Okay, so that we don't lose the pace here. So the next expression is 100% rye. Okay, so and this is 100% rye mash. This is again, the label is incorrect. It is 90 proof. Okay,
90 proof.
Okay, 90 proof. So if we could all move to the rye, please. So can you please tell us about the rye? We have some geeks here, who know about like 4-row rye, 6-row, all that kind of stuff. What can you tell us about the rye that's in here, and how does it end up in this glass?
I mean, it's vegetable enzymatic induced rye distillate. So 100% rye distillate is incredibly challenging to work with. Even Dave Pickerel, the master himself, really screwed up some rye batches, but as an expert distiller, that just goes to show how challenging it is. It's basically trying to distill like a doughy goo. It's not like this pretty distiller's beer. It's not this slurry of grains. It's just this thick mutation of a substance that if you lose control of it, it can seriously not only set your production back, but also really damage your equipment, if not destroy it. So it's challenging to work with. And that's really where Dave shines on it. To me, this checks a lot of boxes because to me, it's objectively good. And it's interesting as well because it's unusually sweet for 100% rye.
And it's got really good legs though, really good legs for 90 proof. Wow.
That a lot of that is to the farm, and all of our whiskeys, we actually put in the barrel at 110 proof, which is the legal limit. And the way we see it when we just recently moved from 30 barrel blends or vats up to 60. And the way we see it is we want to use the least amount of water as possible, even though we do use the same water to proof it down as we do in the distillery, which is obviously hugely important. But we wanted to add the least amount of water to it as possible. Now, at the distiller or at the barrel houses, which are the rick houses, which are on that same family farm, the Almond family farm, it's thirsty air out there. It's very arid. Think like Denver and, the west side of, the Rocky Mountains up there. It's very arid. It's very dry. The air is thirsty. So we lose about 4% water a year, which is
okay. And what can you tell us about the enzymes? Is there, are these enzymes that you're getting from, somebody, like Dr. Patrick Heist, where are the enzymes coming from?
I'm actually not allowed to say.
Okay. That's
That's
perfectly fine.
I really even didn't get a direct answer, to be totally fair. If you look at the more protected things in American whiskey production, it's yeast and enzymes used to kickstart fermentation in cases like this.
We had a good session. We had a good session with Dr. Pat 4 or 5 months ago, and he really he taught us a lot about that stuff, and it was fascinating. How much disclosure some people are allowed to give and some people aren't allowed to give.
I don't get it. There are so many, factors when doing single barrel sales that I'm heading up in Illinois this year that, you technically taste the same whiskey coming out of different barrels and none of them are the same. So there's a lot of moving pieces. It's a really fun case study. I personally keep track of the samples I get, where they're from, what they taste like. If they pick a barrel, if an account, an off-premise or on-premise account picks a barrel, I actually like to look at the barrel and see what woodwork is going on in there. It's just an endless curiosity, and it's a rabbit hole I just really enjoy going.
Well, having been at Beverage Tasting Institute and having been at Warehouse, working with Gene, I'm sure that you geek out on this stuff as much as a lot of the people here too. No, it's awesome.
I try not to get too crazy about it. I did a lot of virtual tastings last year with some kind of high tech firms, with like Dell and Oracle and Intel and stuff like that. And they're like, well, how much of a nerd are you? And I'm like, okay, fellas, I'm actually running this Zoom off a Raspberry Pi computer. And I did all the programming myself using Box 86. And they're like, who are you? I'm like, I'm Batman, but not at all. And
you're a carpenter.
I love being
He's an artist. I want to make sure people know he's also an artist and a carpenter. The shelves behind him, Eric put up himself. He made them from barrels and all that kind of stuff. So, he's a Renaissance man. So let's get back to Woodinville. So we have the bourbon, we have the rye. By the way, this rye is a little bit too drinkable. It's really, it goes down really nicely, but it still has very, very distinct rye character. Between the rye and the bourbon, which do you consider to be the flagship expression for Woodinville? Is it more of a bourbon house or more of a rye house? What would you say?
We don't really have a flagship. When I was hired, there's so many bourbons now, and so many. We're spoiled for choice, to say the least. So we kind of just lean into whatever the account demands or whatever they lean on. I like being equally versed in all of them.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's a fair answer. And how much do these cost, the bourbon and the rye, approximately?
Bourbon's going to probably hover, give or take a couple of bucks, depending on where you shop. It's going to hover probably around 40. The rye, it's going to be 40 and under on the bourbon. I'm going on Gene pricing now, so that's down. Probably substantially down from that. The rye is probably going to be 45-ish. And
very reasonable. Those are very reasonable prices.
And the port finish that. Let's just go ahead and pour ourselves a little bit of port.
Yeah, let's. This port, I've been looking at this port because I recently rearranged my whiskey shelves, and I found out that I had acquired quite a few port-aged whiskeys. It's something that I just ended up finding out that I like by default, because when I looked at my bottles. So I'm really looking forward to this. This is an expression of yours I have not had yet. So we're all about to taste the port together. Please tell us not only what grain is in here, but also about the barrels.
It's exactly the same as the bourbon in every way. 5 years inside that 53-gallon barrel. It's all the same yeast. It's all the same grains. The difference is that we finished this for 6 months in fresh Portuguese port wine barrels. No, I'm not allowed to say which port wines they are. I'm contractually obliged to not disclose that. But to me, and this was when I was at Warehouse before this position had even opened up, brought 2 bottles of these home, and we have plenty of whiskey in our home. And my wife, being the bulldog that she was, she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Just drink it, just try it." And she's like, "Okay, well, that shut me up." Because I mean, when we're drinking at home, unless we're like mowing the grass and I'm having a couple yard sodas or something like that, we drink to enjoy it at home, not to, get intoxicated. And to me, this is, it just screams Manhattan. It's great by itself, but if I come home and I pour myself one of these, Susan knows to give me like 10 minutes. And just
is this part of the core range for Woodinville? Will this always be
Yes.
on the shelves?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And the price point on this one, you said about?
It's going to hover around 50, give or take.
Okay.
Possibly less.
By the way, people, I don't know if you're paying attention at all to the chat because you and I are talking, but people are loving this one. Can you do me a favor as somebody who's been at BTI, when you nose this, Eric, when you nose this, tell us what you're getting from this, because I'm curious what somebody, with your experience gets from a taste from a port age whiskey.
I mean, to me, like with our regular bourbon, which is obviously the base of this whiskey, even going back to the bourbon and doing them side by side, I do get some wine esters coming out of that glass or out of that bottle. To me, this is just that marriage of wineys that's already there to the residual port that has been soaked into the wood that is being married into our whiskey for the 6 months that we finish it, 6 to 8 months depending. And it just really, I get something different out of it every time. I have a bottle from the distillery when I was there that they etched like the label on to the bottle. Yes, they misspelled my last name at the distillery too. So if you mispronounce my last name, you're not the only one. This is Rosentreter, right? Yes. Got it. Right. If you look at American whiskeys, we've really, really just taken the first steps into wine finishing and really explored it all together. I know High West is doing wonderful things with their barrel finishing right now. Anytime I see, I think I have one on the shelf somewhere. We did an Amontillado cask finish of the American Prairie at Warehouse when I was there, and I bought 6 bottles of that for myself.
Wow! Wait. High West American Prairie Amontillado cask.
Yes.
Wow, that must have been incredible.
It really was, and it's quietly in these smaller distilleries like mine that are really trying to honestly eke out a niche market and really develop a fan base the old-fashioned way. When I would recommend, either my Woodinville port finish or another American whiskey with a finish on it that we had there, especially with the High West that we had just for us, people would just glance over it and try to get those top 10 brands. And it was an interesting litmus test because a lot of the drinking public had an abundance of time for, the better part of 2020. And as an enthusiast and a professional, I have found an important part of my job is to gently unlearn people and perhaps break down preconceived notions of what they think it is. And that's why I loved, as part of the brand story, that when we came up with our bourbon mash bill, that they tasted it blind and did really honestly that way. It's a really, really cool thing to do. And it's challenging to taste things blind.
I'm glad you mentioned that you're a small distillery. So what does that mean in the world of whiskey? It's like, so, when you say small, obviously, you can talk about in terms of number of barrels or in terms of where you're available. Okay. Can you expound a little bit upon the concept of small distillery and what that means to you at Woodinville?
When I think of small, I think of also big, going up against, the giants of, those legacy whiskey producers in Kentucky. And we're not trying to be that because they're doing what we're doing, but plus 150 some odd years, if not more. So by small, I mean, I think we did 40,000 cases. So 9-liter cases. So 40,000 cases at 12 bottles a case. Quick math, that's a pretty small amount. It doesn't seem like it, but it is. Illinois is still out of rye because glass shortage is a thing. Our distributing channels are still just a total wreck from the last couple of years. On top of,
are you available all over the country?
No, we are available in, I want to say 25 or 26 states with no plan to expand for a couple of years.
And how many of those states do you cover yourself?
3.
What are the states?
Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota.
Okay, Minnesota. Okay, got it. And are you available outside of the country at all?
Not yet. I would like to be, maybe in the next couple years, but we have to lay down a lot more whiskey before we even really think about that. We're trying to own the yard before we buy the block.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I understand that. You definitely got to build the bricks. You got to lay the foundation. Before you expand. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you look at like what Paul Letko did for Few. He killed himself for that brand. And he was fly. He did a lot of the work himself. I personally, I see value in digital marketing. I get it. That's the world we live in right now. But what I still find to be the most valuable is actually doing the work, doing tastings like this, small, intimate, gatherings where you can openly discuss comfortably. Because, again, I learned this from Delilah's too. And a friend of mine that I worked with for about 10 years there said it best, is like the magic that is Delilah's is that it's not trying to be something for everybody. It's trying to be everything for somebody. And really carving that out, and that's just, to me, I think that's important.
I like the way you described that. I mean, but that's the right thing. Every business needs to understand its core, because they could lose a part of themselves if they're not careful with that. What I'd like to do now is I'd like us to talk about single casks. Okay, so I want to warn everybody, these next two, the last two, are cask strength. These are single casks. The first one we're going to do is a single cask from Gold Eagle. Let's see, both of these are almost 60%. So be careful, everybody. Both of these are almost 60%. They are both bourbon. Can you tell us about the mash bill and tell us about this specific cask that Golden Eagle has selected?
It's the same mash bill. It's genetically the same as our core bourbon. It's just when an account picks a barrel, say Gold Eagle or Warehouse Liquors, they get the unchilled or non-chill filtered, not proof down version. So even if they when an account picks a bottle or picks a barrel, that whiskey is still inside the barrel when they pick it. And something that we try to do as much as possible is if I'm presenting to, say, Gene or Gold Eagle or another place that does that, I'm given 4 samples, sometimes 6, but usually 4. And whatever sample isn't picked will go back into rotation.
Okay. So with Gold Eagle, so how, I don't know Gold Eagle. I know Warehouse. I don't know Gold Eagle. How does Gold Eagle themselves go about picking what they want, to put under their name?
They turn down more than they take.
Okay.
Talk it, and please, I know we all like our chains. We all like our independent business people. For those of you who have the wherewithal to get to Libertyville to go to Gold Eagle, please go check out their store. It's an amazing independent business. I was first introduced to them with this new role, but I'd known about them for a while, and they are our people. They're nerds. They have bottles open. They have a little tasting area, which is incredibly dynamic for what they're doing. They're really developing and curating a crowd up there, and it's cool to see something like that happen outside of the city of Chicago. It's a strip mall, but it's like once you walk in, if you're a whiskey person, you're you're going to have a hard time not spending $300. I'm not allowed to go.
I know how that is. I know how that is.
If I go in there, my wife says, you better leave your card, leave your credit card in your car, because it's,
By the way, that's funny. I find that to be hilarious because most people don't know this. Eric's wife is also in the industry. Okay. So the fact that she's telling you to leave your card home when you go to a liquor store says something. I love that.
No, not leave the car, because
the card, leave the card,
yeah,
leave the card home. The credit card.
Yeah, leave the credit card in the car.
Yeah.
I'm like,
right.
okay. My wife, Susan, she was the buyer for Fountainhead for many years. May Fountainhead rest in peace, obviously. We actually met, she came into Delilah, she helped open up Kuma's 2, which was on Diversey, and that's gone. But she came into Delilah's on a Tuesday, ordered a Zombie Dust when that was like the popular beer, and a double wild turkey rye 101.
Whoa.
Yeah, and this was maybe 4:15 on a Tuesday.
So this was love at first sight, is what you're saying.
Actually 10 months later we were married. And, I mean, we were in our 30s, we're like, all right, can we, like, and if you met my wife,
I've met her, she's great.
It would click with you that like, all right, we're in our 30s, you want to do this dance or not? And when I called her my better half for the first time, she laughed and then looked at me and she's like, oh shit, you actually mean that, don't you? And I'm like, yeah, I do.
Everybody should know that at the few 10th anniversary party, I hung out with Eric and his wife back in the distillery. We were having it with other people from Sampson and Surrey and a few other places, and it was we were just having a great time. It was a lot of fun. Good people. Yeah, good people and good times.
I mean, for as challenging as our jobs are, and the industry has definitely really been booted around for the last couple years. That one thing that my wife and I remind ourselves of quite frequently is that we help provide people with what they look forward to doing all day. And for as frustrated as we might get, that's a pretty cool position to have.
Yeah.
For the younger people or the whiskey newbies coming in, I always try to take them under, offer them sage advice and blah, blah, blah. But like, people constantly ask Susan and I, like, how do we have such cool jobs? And it's like, well, work a decade plus in some of the most important whiskey bars, you'll
eventually end up in a place that's good,
it wasn't planned at all, Gil. I was an electrician when I started part-time at Delilah's, and that it was just my path, and so when Mike hired me, he said 2 things. If you always show up on time and never steal from me, you'll always have a job.
Wow, that is one hell of a low bar, but it tells you something about the other people who get hired. That's awesome.
Well, that was when it was kind of still that punk rock bar that happened to have a lot of whiskey. The whiskey, the heavy whiskey attachment with Delilah's has been a relatively recent thing. And I mean, when I was hired there, I got hired because I broke up a fight upstairs on Punk Rock Monday, and I wasn't working there. I broke up a fight because I grew up in a big family. That's just what we do. We just break up fights. Big Irish family. We fight sometimes, and it was reactionary. I went up to the bar, and Jim McCann, who opened up Longman and Eagle, was part of that crew. I asked for another round, and I took out my $3 for my shot of Jim Beam and my can of American beer that I certainly can't drink anymore. He looked at me, he's like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, what? He's like, you're not paying for anything for the rest of the night, right? Okay. I'm in my early 20s, like $3 a round. That's awesome.
Yeah, you got some cred there. Look, I'd love to continue the story, but I've got to tell you, we have to move on to this last whiskey here, because here's what's interesting to me as we move on to the last whiskey. So both of these, so the last 2 are both cask strength, both selected, both single casks, one selected by Golden Eagle, one selected by Warehouse.
Yes.
Is there any difference in how these things are aged in the mash bill, or is it just that Warehouse liked one cask and Golden Eagle liked another cask? Like, are there any other differences here?
Nope, that's it. All the samples that we pull are on paper the same, but trying them side by side with either team or our accounts, there are subtle differences, sometimes not subtle differences, and that's what really, for me, brings out the romance of the spirit. Is, I consider the spirit off the still, which is, not this obviously, but obviously comes still as clear as we all know. And I see the barrel as the mom. This is going to raise the whiskey to behave a certain way and do the thing. Nothing that comes out of our barrels is going to be younger than 5 years old, excuse me. We non-chill filter, which to some people in the whiskey community is a big thing.
Right. And these are natural color, right? Non-chill filter, natural color?
No color at all.
Okay. And so
you're not allowed to add color to bourbon. Come on.
Okay. So
it's a different story. We don't color our rye, but you are legally allowed to. We don't color ours at all, but our bourbon, no, we can't color it.
Ariel Eisenberg just said something that I was about to say, that it's not as hot. It doesn't drink as hot as the Gold Eagle. The Warehouse drinks a little bit easier than the Gold Eagle, like not as hot. I also find the Warehouse to be a little bit more rich. Okay, there's something about it that to me is a little bit more full flavored, but sure. What do you think about it? And other people, put things in the comments.
And there's no right or wrong answer, everybody. You taste what you taste, you smell what you smell. Diet always affects taste receptors. To the ladies in the house, you are better tasters and smellers than we are, as I'm sure you know already. As I lovingly say to my wife, that just means I have to practice more.
I have to tell you, I like the Warehouse pick better, but I like them both. As a matter of fact, I like
Gene still has a couple bottles left. I believe it still lives on the shelves there.
What does this go for?
I want to say 80.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. It's a cask strength single barrel, so that makes sense.
Yeah, we usually, depending on the store's margins. I mean, obviously Gene is downtown, so big city, big prices, especially with what he does down there. Usually it's around $70 to $80.
Got it. If you can talk to me about one specific thing here. All of your whiskeys seem to have really good legs, like a good oily finish to them. Can you talk a little bit to that? Because, every one of them, I'm doing this, and it's amazing what they're doing to the glass. And Kenny's favorite word, mouthfeel. If you could address that a little bit, and then we're going to open it up for questions.
Especially on the last two, that's where like the non-chill filtering comes in. Non-chill, when whiskey is poured out of the barrel, it's filtered in some way or another, because with our heavy toast or heavy char, some of those hunks of carbon break off whilst aging. And so it's run through either a screen or a membrane. We use membranes. And when people filter it, that's mostly, it takes the fatty acids out. It takes the lipids out of the whiskey. If it's under 100 proof, which obviously our three first whiskeys that we had tonight are all under 100 proof.
Hold on. Is there somebody who's not
yeah, I took care of it.
Possible? Okay, got it. Thanks. Sorry, keep going. Somebody was not muted.
Eyes in the sky. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
So basically, if it's under 100 proof and not chill filtered, those fatty acids and lipids can actually congeal and add a cloudiness to the whiskey. They're increasingly rare, but before the whiskey boom happened, if I would see a cloudy bottle on the shelf, I would buy it immediately, because I'm like, I know that's a non-chill filtered whiskey. Right. Once you go north of 100 proof, which obviously our barrel picks are, the barrel proofs tend to be in between 115 to, obviously, Gene's is 120.72 proof, or so that's pretty up there. I've seen it go a little bit higher, but that's usually the Goldilocks zone of where barrels get harvested. So
do you guys do a lot of single barrels? You do a lot
What's
of
that?
single barrels? Do you guys do a lot of single barrels for different
No, in 2022 this year, I'll be selling 12 barrels of bourbon.
Okay, got it.
We don't want our single barrel sales to be supplementary. We don't want to use them to build our brand, which is something that I think bourbon is lousy with right now. And for a business model, I think is extremely risky. What I'm doing, and I've turned down more people than I've said yes to already, that we're using this as a reward, like for people that we have relationships with already. Maybe potentially leveraging that for sales and building those relationships. There's some pretty prominent accounts that have approached me and said, well, historically, we haven't done a lot of business together, but if we want to start building this relationship, that's my job.
Right.
I'd love to.
No, I get it. I mean, you have to, again, it goes back to what your core is. What is the core of your job? What is the core of your retailing strategy? And getting back to the core of what we do here, I want us to move along. Eric Leader, do you have any specific questions for Eric Rosentreter?
Actually, no specific questions. Everything was amazing this evening. I really enjoyed it. I gotta say the port is fantastic. And I would probably get a bottle of each if I was allowed to. So no, I don't have any questions.
Okay, got it. So our first question, Mr. Ariel Eisenberg, please unmute. And by the way, Ariel, you can ask 2 questions because I know you have more than one. It's okay.
I have blocked off the rest of my evening for everybody here, so
don't say that. That's dangerous.
It's been a very long day, and it's a good thing that my card is in my jacket right now, and we're not shopping online. When you were talking about chunks of carbon or char that might break off in the cask, and that you run it through a filter or a sieve. What type of material are you talking about? Because you were talking that it could catch some of the oils or bind some of the different chemicals and pull them out of.
That's not so much the material at play to catch the fatty acids and lipids. That is the temperature.
Okay.
Think of if you cook meat, and I mean, I'm old school South Side, so we always had the fat jar next to the stove. And once that cools, you see those things separate inside. It's the exact same principle whilst filtering whiskey. In that, like if you chill those, whether you're using, a fine cloth or some sort of membrane or metal filter, if you chill that, those fatty acids will attach themselves to whatever. And it's not just one thing. Like it's not just a thing we put over the bunghole on the barrel as we dump it. It is a machine that it's many, many layers. Ours is over 6. I forget exactly how much, because it was really hot on the farm that day and I was heat exhausted, but I want to say ours is around 8 filters that it runs through.
So, Gil, you allowed me more than one question. So here's the follow-up. When we're talking chill filtered versus non-chill filtered, and you're saying, it's part of the cooling process, the temperature, is catching the lipids and everything. What's the difference there for, someone like me who doesn't know between a chill filter and a non-chill filter?
Sure. As Gil mentioned, especially going into like our Gold Eagle and Warehouse picks respectively, when Gil mentioned that those whiskeys have legs, that's where it comes from. It's having those fatty acids and lipids still within the whiskey itself that really cause that beautiful cascade down the glass when swirling. I'm personally not a fan of swirling, but if you're rolling glass and all of that too, it's the exact same effect. And it's the same thing with wine as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we have the other Eisenberg. Josh, please unmute yourself.
Hey,
Hi, Josh.
Thank you very much. So yeah, a little tag team here. So question for you. I'd love just maybe a little bit more color commentary on the the family that is growing the rye for you, and the rye. I found the rye to be extraordinarily different than many ryes. I'm a big fan of rye, but this one was not only exceptionally smooth, but very nuanced. And so I just want to understand more about the family that's growing the rye for you, and kind of it's always the alchemy, right, of the balance of the grain and the aging process. But just tell us more, if you could.
With the rye, to me, the rye is what really, the port finished and the regular bourbon are spectacular as well. But the rye, as a nerd, is really what stopped me dead in my tracks. It's counterintuitive. It's way sweeter than I thought it would be. To me, that's what not only highlights the grain. Like if people have an empty glass and they have a vessel of hopefully some sort of filtered water next to them, take a little sip of that rye, and then take like a sip of water directly after. And it's taking the sip of water after that really brings that rye expectation out. That's where I start to get the mint, the peppercorns, and all of that. To me, the rye highlights our wood more than anything else does, because it's very, very sweet. It's very approachable. I love the rye more and more, and we are actually doing one single barrel of rye in Illinois this year. So we're launching that. So not sure where it's going to go yet. Still working on it. As somebody who negotiates relationships, I have to manage egos as well. So trying to build that conversation and build that interest around it. Josh, I hope that answers your question. It's grain, you get the wood. But if you still have some left, maybe not tonight or tomorrow when your palate's fresh, take a little sip of that rye, and then just immediately after, almost like a chaser, do it like you're in college. Take a slug of some filtered water after, and that's what really brings out that rye mintiness, that really bright, that fresh rye. Whereas our 90 proof rye out of the barrel is pretty sweet.
Got it. Great answer.
Not like sweet, but like sweet.
No, that's great. All right, Michael Nolan, please unmute. And then after Nolan, we have Lynn Schatz.
Thank you. First off, Eric, I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time with us tonight, talking about your whiskey. Also, thank you very much for all the samples you provided us. It was fantastic.
It's my pleasure.
I just want to clarify, because I want to make sure I didn't misunderstand. Your straight bourbon, the straight rye, and the port cask, are those chill filtered, or is everything?
Those are chill. Those are chill
filtered.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Why are you doing that?
Again, like once you go below 100 proof on non-chill filtering, the whiskey can get cloudy, and by that I mean the fatty acids and lipids can.
I understand. I guess I feel more and more whiskey enthusiasts are more sophisticated and actually prefer to be non-chilled filtered.
You'd be surprised. I don't disagree with you on that at all, Michael, but to the layperson that might be out and about and discovering our whiskey on their own for the first time after maybe seeing our brand out there in a non-interacting sort of way like we are tonight, if you pick up this bottle of rye, and for one, I mean, just the color on 5 years is insane. But if you pick that up as a layperson and you see flocculation happening, which is the recongealing of fatty acids and lipids, that might put you off. Does it change the mouthfeel? Sure, but I would challenge seasoned tasters as well as unseasoned tasters to pick up a bottle of our rye right now and have them tell me whether or not this is chill filtered, because it drinks like a non-chill. And it's kind of one of those just really cool points of engagement.
The other question I had was, I think you kind of answered it already. It was I was going to ask, do you do any single barrels of the rye? So
We're doing one in Illinois this year. We're trying to do one in every state that we are in. But its rye is really challenging. It's going to be a bit more expensive. So if you go to, if he ends up doing one, he may actually ask for your kidney. We're working on it. We're trying our best to be egalitarian. I don't like to say no to people, but I am prepared to say no to people that are famous for cultivating whiskey experiences. Be like, okay, cool. But, you know, again, our single barrel or our private select barrels are not meant to be a flash in the pan. They're meant as a reward and as a thank you for supporting us.
So at the very least, if you could let us know when it comes out, where it might be available, because then we'll be able to jump on it.
Legally,
if that's possible. If that's
legally through my social media channels, I'm not allowed. It's kind of like FCC rules. I'm legally not allowed to call out specific bars unless I do them in threes. It could be seen as pay to play. I can't say go to Delilah's and try. I know.
Well, actually, no, I know that that's an issue. I remember that Brett
thank
Pontani,
you, Evan, for doing that.
Yeah. Well, no, that's an issue. That's an issue because I remember Pontani told us that he sometimes wanted to get all of the bottles of a specific thing, and he was not legally allowed to do so. You know, it is like some of the bottles had to go to different places. So that must be the similar thing you're talking about.
No. As far as like Gil, I'll email you. Hey, once this decision has been made, I obviously want to keep you and yours in the inner circle and do that. I want it to be a special experience for all those who want it to be that. But as far as doing like Instagram shout out, Liquor Commission could come after me technically with one account. Which,
understood.
As far as your production goes, how much of it's rye versus how much of it's bourbon?
Most of it's bourbon. Yeah.
I mean, like 80-20, 90-10?
I would probably best guess say that it's probably 90-10 in that area. I would have to go back and ask my distilling team, but it's very, very heavy bourbon.
2 weeks out of the year then, in a sense. Yeah,
we distill it when we have it available.
Right. And I know it's hard to distill. It's a pain in the ass. So
it is. It's very much that. When I was out on the family farm, they were like in the midst of doing their rye harvest, and it's a challenging grain. I mean, it's so compact, it's so tight. You don't get a lot of those good enzymes out of there to kickstart fermentation. So that's where the vegetable enzymes come in. Got it. Again, proprietary. I wish I could tell you.
Don't worry about it. No, it's good. It's all good. We understand. We understand. Thank you. Great questions, Michael. Lynn, please unmute.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi there. I have a weird question. I'm finding in all five slight grassiness, which is something I love with rye. Absolutely love. Mm-hmm. And I was told by a local distiller, whose rye, by the way, does not have any grassiness. Oh, no, we don't cut that deeply into the tails. Which makes me wonder, do the cuts in bourbon tend to be different from the cuts in a rye? Or why am I getting this lovely, lovely hint of grassiness in all five of these and not in some ryes where they pride themselves on not going into the tails?
Okay, so I'm going to send you my email address. No, because I want to reach out to my distillery team about this, because full disclosure, this is a little outside of my scope of expertise. So thank you, Lynn, for
sorry.
It's of my experience tasting many ryes and that is a very keen flavor to pull out, especially with ours, because it is so sweet and there's a lot of that sweetness up front.
But it's not grassy, isn't sweet. That's what's so interesting.
No, it's
I've
counter
heard
sweet.
people say, "Ooh, if it's grassy, that's bad because you went into the tails." And of course, somebody like me who likes grassiness, not too much, but just enough, says, "Oh, that's one of the beauties of rye." I've never had a bourbon that had that hint, and I love it.
Yeah, remember, Lynn, if I may just add something here, just remember that their bourbons are high rye bourbons.
I know that.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, we're talking 22% rye. I mean, that's
I
a good
know
amount.
that. It is still the only high rye bourbon I've had that hint of grassiness. And I thought it was awesome.
Oh, that's great. Wonderful. Well, that's good.
I definitely got that when working with Redemption for the few years that I did, and having the privilege to go to the distillery before people were really doing that, because it's the old Seagram's distillery. It's been there since 1856 or 57. I forget my history. I apologize. But that was something that even with our, obviously the 95.5 mash out of Indiana, which is officially its own designation right now as Indiana Rye, and our high rye bourbon, there was grassiness in there. I think it's a byproduct of rye, and
Totally.
and some people say peppercorn. Some people taste leather. Other than that one time in college, I've never tasted leather, so no what to say about that. But the grassiness, to me, the grassiness of our rye this is kind of where I was going, Lynn, with like, pour yourself a little bit, take that water slug afterwards, just literally just take a sip, coat your palate with it, and then go into just really just throw some water at it. Okay. That's where the mintiness and the grassiness and even just like a little bit of lemongrass comes in. The brightness is there. It's just a little more hidden in ours.
I did not need the water to get the grassiness. It was subtle and really just lovely.
Lynn, that was a great question, and I will make sure that you get Eric's email address. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
And then
you.
We'll make sure.
I want to know now too, actually. So
no, that's great. No, it's a great question. And remember, Eric, I mean, you're the first person whom we're interviewing who has participated in one of our prior, events. Okay, it's because you were with us with when we did Compass Box recently. Although actually, now that I think about it, Bloom, you actually led one once, right? Actually, so Bloom might be technically the first because Bloom does 50 state blends. So actually, Bloom, so I changed that, cool. Right? Yeah. So actually, no, Eric, you're the second one. So you were sort of prepared for geeky questions. You knew that they were going to come because you saw what we did to Pete Friello last month. So it does happen. One question that I do have for you, which hasn't been asked, can you tell us a little bit about your water source? Okay. Is there anything in particular about the water source particular to your part of the country? Anything you do to it?
It is Cascade Mountain water.
Okay.
Yep.
Nice and simple. Okay.
Yep.
Great. And can you tell us also about the state of the distillery and visits during the time of COVID? How are things going over there? Like, can people do distillery visits?
Yes.
How's that working?
Absolutely. Like most people who believe in math and science and medicine, our distillery has been doing tours with an abundance of caution, doing that whole thing. I highly encourage people to, for one, just explore that part of the country if you haven't been there. My wife and I try to go to Ireland and or Scotland every year. Of course, 2020 happened and that just all went to pot. So when I first went out to the Pacific Northwest, when Woodinville hired me, my wife has never been there. And when I landed and within the first half day I was there, I'm like, we need to come here again and just rent a car for a week and just explore. It's very open and welcoming community. Our distillery is amazing. There's a lot to do around there. Going out to the family farm is a little different. We don't really do public things out at the family farm that's more reserved for doing private select picks, things like that, really more immersive tours, because between the travel and depending on the time of year, it's 3 hours each way, give or take.
Yeah, that's a hike. Yeah, that's a hike.
It is a hike. But getting out there is worth the trip. It's very much it's green, it's lush, it's very much like a la Scotland, a la Germany, or Ireland, excuse me. That's just getting out there, exploring. It's super rich. It's a lot more hilly than Scotland and Ireland, but it's worth the trip. And
Yeah,
there's
actually somebody here posted, I think it was Sandra who posted that. I think she's going to be going to Richmond pretty soon. I think maybe in a month or so. So
cool.
So Bellevue, she's going to Bellevue. Okay. So
we do have distillery only releases. So for the people in the room that liked our port finish, we do have distillery only available, PX finish, as well as Oloroso finish. I believe we still have some Muscatel finish at the distillery available as well, which is where I think Sagamore did it before us, but I think we're the second distillery to do it, to finish in Muscatel pipes.
Oh, cool.
So,
I have a hunch that people are sending Sandra orders right now. So hope she'll bring a big suitcase.
and I am not, I'm so sorry, I'm not keeping up on the chat. I'm seeing the 99 plus thing on the chat. So Gil, if anybody has any questions in the chat, please let me know or raise your hand.
Yeah, one thing that is that Eric can send you the chat, right? Eric, you can download the chat and send it to him. Yeah, so you can actually get the chat, and if there are any specific questions that you want to reach out to individuals with answers to, we can help you do that.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so yeah, definitely, because obviously we're focusing here on the talk. It's tough to also pay attention to the chat at the same time. Eric Leader, do you have any other questions for Eric Rosentreter?
Nope.
No? Okay, great, wonderful. Well, Eric, I have to tell you that this was great. I mean, these were all delicious. One thing that I mentioned to you is that when Eric Leader and I started this, it was right when Whiskey Week was canceled. Whiskey Week was canceled in March of 2020, and we felt we needed to do something, and so we did it. And people like you who have shared their time and their knowledge and their products with us have helped make the lockdown become much more palatable for us. And part of it also is that we also like introducing people to whiskeys that they may not have had before. And I think that we did that tonight, because I'm fairly certain that many people here had not had Woodinville, and many of them had not seen the breadth of what you have available to us. So what I'd like everybody to do right now is please pour yourself another dram if you are so inclined, or if you have something else that you haven't finished yet that you want to. I'm going back to the port cask, and I'd like everybody to please unmute. Everybody please unmute and join me in saying thank you very much to Eric Rosentreter from Woodinville.
Thank you very much.
Good stuff.
Eric, this is wonderful. Do you have any final words for us before we turn off the recording?